Welcome to the Got Mental Health Podcast, a fun and safe space where we talk all things mental health. I am your host, Rachel Cove. I'm an entrepreneur, author, mother, and a professional in the field of mental health and addiction for the last 14 years.
I'm your co-host, Arthur Mogilevsky, business entrepreneur, girl dad, animal activist, and owner of AM Healthcare.
This is the Got Mental Health Podcast, a fun and safe space where we talk all things mental health. We interview experts, thought leaders, and professionals in the field of mental health.
Our goal is to educate, inspire, and empower people to take care of their mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Join us weekly as we talk all things mental health.
Follow us wherever you go to listen to your podcast.
And don't forget to rate and review, as it really supports our show. Welcome back to the Got Mental Health Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Cove, along with my co-host, Arthur
Mogilevsky, Rachel.
Whatever.
One of these days, we'll get it.
We'll get it. I am so thrilled to have Alan Cardoza on the show, who's always been a mentor and teacher for me, especially in the world of radio and podcasts. So I'm so excited to have you here.
It's my pleasure.
Alan is a licensed international detective and the founder of West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations. Between these two companies, he successfully located, returned, and or transported thousands of runaway or at-risk youth to homes, hospitals, and schools for over 40 years. Alan is the past president of the World Association of Detectives and has traveled the world returning abducted children to their custodial parents or guardians and has broken up numerous human trafficking rings. Through his speeches, articles, and ebook Runaway in America, Alan offers solutions for parents and teens and sheds light on the connection between runaway teens and human trafficking. And I've just learned that you are now the vice president of international business development for one of the most well-respected investigation companies in the world, Conflict International. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a big deal.
Yes, it is.
Welcome to the show,
All
Alan.
right. Well, it's so good to see you. I mean, I love when we get a chance to spend time together, and I feel like when COVID hit, we didn't get that kind of time that we would normally get. So I'm so glad that we're here.
I'm so glad we're here. And I feel like you said something yesterday, which was pretty funny about you. Mm-hmm. Who do you think he is?
Are you the real Liam Neeson?
Like you're like the real life Liam Neeson.
Are you the real life real?
You know, actually, there's a great story with that. Is that when doing my show, we were across the hall from where they were doing the setup and everything for Taken when they were just doing the original stuff.
Yeah.
And so I popped in to talk to him. I go, so tell me about this and what you're doing and stuff. And so they started talking about it, and then they asked about me, and they're like, oh my God, I think you really did what we're doing.
Right.
So it was great. So I got to hang out with them a little bit. After the movie came out, I had 22 people contact me and say, was that based on you?
That's funny.
No, it wasn't. But it was one of the movies that was actually done better than a lot of other movies that have been done that involve that type of thing, because there's a lot of little things that they did that people wouldn't normally think about, like the way that the guy goes to the airport and he's this good-looking guy and he talks to the girls and he befriends them, rather than what a lot of people think is, well, somebody just gets grabbed off the street. You know, they just put them in a bag and throw them in a car. No, it's not like that. It's closer to what they did in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just get right into it, because you're bringing that up, and I think this is a subject that is really important for people to listen to. Mm-hmm. I think that it's an injustice to our children, to the world, if we remain ignorant to what's happening in this world. And, you know, I have a 5-year-old kid, and he likes to live in this, in his reality where everything is about happiness and love and rainbows and sunshine. Mm-hmm. And whilst I want him to maintain that type of joy and happiness, I also think I have to prepare him for the ugliness that can exist in the world.
You're absolutely right. And it's a balance, because you don't want to make them fearful of everybody, but at the same time, they do need to know that there are some people out there that are going to try to do some strange things.
That's fascinating. First of all, I want to preface this by saying I am extremely excited about this interview. As interesting, as deep, and as dark, and as scary as this conversation can be, how does it relate to mental health? And I mean, for me, right away, you can see how this affects the families, how it affects the children, how it affects the community. And it's so deep, and you've been doing this for so long. What do you see are kind of the basic, or not the basic, but like the systemic issues within family systems that can create these types of scenarios? Have you found over the years that there's a common thread, something that can lead to that, within the cases that you worked in?
Actually, there is a common thread, and it's lack of communication. I was speaking before a group of psychiatrists in Washington, D.C., and there was a similar question. They said, if there is one common thread between a lot of these cases that you're getting, what is it? And I said, absentee father.
Wow.
And everybody kind of stopped for a minute, and I said, not necessarily always physically absent, but if you are also mentally absent. I said, so many of the young people that I end up working with that have been exploited by people, they talk about having no relationship with their father. And I would ask them, well, what does your father do for a living? I don't know, he goes to a building. You know, there's no communication in that family. So now when this young person is out on the street, or they're on their way to school, or whatever they're doing, and somebody approaches them, they don't really have that sort of thing to talk about, you know, with, well, you know, when I talked to my dad, he said maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And these people act like they're your family. They act like they're going to give you. So they know to ask questions about, don't you hate when parents put rules on you? Well, yeah. If you're 12 years old, you probably do hate that.
And just to give the audience clarity, you're speaking about the people who do the kidnapping, the
Yes.
perpetrators.
Yes.
So they often go into the world disguising themselves as very friendly, outgoing, extroverted
Yes.
people. That's really scary.
I know.
And so, again, you're saying that a lot of the children who have been kidnapped, the common theme is that there's a lack of communication and a lack of a father figure in their life?
Yes. Yeah, in many cases, because I'm dealing more with boys. Now, when we're dealing with girls, we have female agents with us, and the girls are usually the ones that are bonding more with the female agent. When I'm involved in a case, it's a male that we're looking for, because oftentimes we're looking for somebody who's missing. And so we're getting all the information from the family. They might have started out running away. So they may have had a disagreement at home. And they go, well, that's it, I'm out of here. But once they get out there, unfortunately, there are predators that are going to see them as a runaway and see them as an asset to bring them into their little family.
That's unbelievable. I love the fact that you stated it's not about only physical presence. It's also about emotional and mental presence with the child, right? Because you can have a lot of fathers listening to this podcast saying, well, I'm there, right? I go to work, I provide to the family. I'm not running away from this difficult situation or whatever the situation they see it as. But being connected with your child and being truthful and honest. There was this challenge. My wife turned it on randomly, and I got sucked into it, and I just started crying like crazy because of it. It was called a Stranger Danger Challenge. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah.
Where different types of families were sitting in together, and they were different types of parenting styles, and they were watching as their parenting styles unfolded on their children while they were playing in a park. And obviously, an actor would come up, and he would pretend that he had some puppies in his car.
Right. And
based off of that parenting style, the children would react. Do you find that there are set parenting styles that work better than others that you've seen? Obviously, the connection and whatnot, and can you kind of go into that a little bit?
I think if we're talking about set parenting styles, I think one is the communication. The other is where both parents are on the same page. One of the biggest problems, and because we come from a culture that has so much divorce, when you get the two parents that are more concerned with doing it their way than actually focusing on what's best for the child, it makes it easier for children to then start sort of playing one parent off the other a little bit and not really taking to any one style. They're just thinking that part of their job is to just manipulate people to get what you want. So again, one is just keep communicating honestly with your child, and the second thing is work together.
A lot of the groups that I facilitate, I deal with people who grew up in homes where the parents were very neglectful emotionally. And it's a subject I teach a lot about, is how do we communicate and how do we essentially create a safe environment to be honest about how I'm feeling. And actually this week I was working in a group, and it was an all-male group, and we were looking at the relationship between father and son. And back in the old days, not too long ago, to be a good father meant I'm going to work,
right,
and I'm going to provide,
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to go to work, come home, sit on my couch, open a beer, and I did my job for the day. And as a society, that was what it meant to be a good father. And there was no emotional attunement with the child.
Right.
And so I hear this all the time from my clients. Oh, well, my parents were good parents. Oh, my dad was a good dad, and my mom was a good mom. And I tell them, this isn't about labeling your parents. This isn't about saying they were good or bad. This is about asking, what did I learn from my relationship with them? What did I learn from the dynamics? How was I impacted
mm-hmm.
by having a dad come home who you obviously love? You're loyal to your parents. There's oxytocin as soon
mm-hmm.
as you're born to bond you guys. But was there curiosity? Was there questioning going on? And I think that their children are learning so much that if their parents are asking them questions, they're naturally going, oh, questions are normal.
Mm-hmm.
I should ask questions.
Exactly. Yeah, and in fact, and ask questions that don't have a yes or no answer.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things, and I did it with my kids, and it was not, did you have a good day at school? It would be more like, what was the most interesting thing you did today at school?
Right.
Okay, that's not you can't give them a yes or no answer.
Right.
So that's some of the ways in which parents can continue to interact. And those answers, what they think was interesting. And maybe the next day it was, what was the most challenging thing that you had? Now you know what's challenging to your child, and you know what's interesting to your child. So you're gaining information at the same time that they're learning more about either asking or answering questions.
Do you think that if children were taught to trust their feelings and guts more, rather than having their realities denied by their parents, that if there was a potential perpetrator on the street, they would naturally feel that in their bodies? Like,
absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely. And I think, and it's another great thing about communicating with your child. You could communicate to them, you have this gut feeling, you know, and if you're constantly talking to them about, how do you feel about this? Okay, they're going to start trusting their feelings because you're honoring the fact that you're even asking. So yeah, I completely agree.
Well, and it's not only just asking, it's also giving room, even if you disagree or agree with them, to give them the space to be able to feel free to say that, right?
Yes.
Like my daughter would come up and say, I'm angry. Okay, I understand. And it's really furthering that conversation with follow-up questions. What made you angry? Well, how can I help you so that you don't get to this place again, right? And so feeling comfortable with that emotional intelligence. I know you're huge on that with your son, and he expresses that. And partially because of you, in a lot of ways, I have those conversations with my child as well, where it's not, how was your day? Oh, it was good, wonderful. Like if I went to my wife and said, how was your day? It was great, thanks. And then I go on my phone.
You wouldn't be married for 50 years.
I would, the couch would have to be a very comfortable couch. Yeah. And so it's really about being more and more engaging with and being interested in, right? Like, I'll give you a perfect example. My daughter has these after school classes, and yesterday was Lego day. And so it's not like, how was Lego day? It's like, oh, well, what'd you build? And we got excited. It's like, well, let's replicate that at home because we have a ton of Legos, right? So I think, because the listeners are thinking like, okay, well, I have a child, I'm scared, whatever, that this can happen to me. What can I do to prevent that? What can I do so that this doesn't exist? Do I need to shelter my child and not take him to the playground ever? Or do I have to play with them while they're at the playground? Or can I just sit? A lot of it is really just engaging and having a really deep relationship with the child.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought up the yes or no questions. I recently have really tried to ask very specific questions with my son. And, like yesterday, actually, I asked him, I think it was like 3 or 4 questions. And I said, hey, bud, did you have any moments today where you felt happy? Did you have any moments where you felt overwhelmed? Did you have any moments where you felt sad? Did you have any moments where you felt frustrated? And his first response was, yeah, I felt frustrated earlier when I couldn't put my shirt on the way I wanted to put it on. So he's identifying a language at a very important and developmental age, and it becomes their foundation. I think where a lot of parents are misinformed is oh, he's a kid, he doesn't know.
Right.
Bullshit. They know more than us.
Exactly.
So when it comes to, I'm doing a segue here a little bit. How many of your clients now that you work with it's so hard to even say the word kidnapped, because it's a real reality that you're dealing with, and yet it's so sad and terrifying and overwhelming to just speak to. So the fact that families are dealing with this is it's so beyond tragic. But how many of these children, teens, are meeting these people on social media or on online platforms?
Well, it's a really good question, because more and more. So if you would have asked me this question 30 years ago, it would have been like 1%, and now 50%, where there is some sort of contact. Either they have, in some cases, they're talking them into taking off. And again, people think of kidnapping. It's not so much they're going to pull up with a white van and reach in and reach out, grab you, pull you into the van and take off. It's more that they're going to contact you over the internet, and they're going to talk about things that you have in common. And then eventually, well, why don't we meet? Wow, we like all the same things. Why don't we meet? And so they're bringing them kind of into their world. And then if it's drugs or whatever it is, they're bringing them in, and then eventually, well, parents don't know anything. You're better off with us. So it isn't that the idea of kidnapping as much as it is persuasion and bringing somebody in.
What's a typical age range you're looking at right now? Obviously, it can go as low as infancy but what is the age range you're looking at, especially when it's related to social media and the internet?
Most of the cases that we get involved in are more teens, tweens, and young adults. And with young adults, oftentimes it's, they've turned 18, I'm leaving the house, and they get involved with drugs or with people that have them now committing crimes. And now they're embarrassed to go back home, because they don't want to go back home and say, yeah, I'm a criminal now, or I have this drug addiction. And they end up living, we're doing this show from Los Angeles, and on my way here, how many homeless encampments did I see?
Right.
We've got a case going on right now where we're looking for a young man in one of these homeless encampments. The ages range. If we were talking about in other countries, it starts much younger.
Wow. And when you're doing this work, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this.
What?
If I'm ruining your cover, but how do you do the work? Do you go in there pretending to be someone else? You can't go. Should I not even ask that?
No, that's fine.
That's a great question.
No,
I think we're leading the breadcrumbs to the...
Well, it's a great question, and I'm now to that stage in life to where I'm usually not the undercover person.
Right.
Okay. That's why I can go on a show like this. That's why it's okay if people see my face. I'm not the undercover guy.
Right.
But to give you an example, some years ago when I did, we were trying to find somebody. This was after Hurricane Katrina, and somebody had stolen the children, and they were running with that group. And so I went in as a movie producer, and I was doing a movie on ways to help and things like this. How can we help these people that end up in these situations and stuff? And what I said was, I had done one over here, but I hadn't gotten the names of everybody, because a lot of them gave their one-word names that they use when they start hanging out in some of these groups. In a homeless encampment, they don't give their full name. They go by different names. And I said, but I'm now in trouble because I didn't get these papers signed. So I have one here called Sunshine, another one called Papa Bear, and different things like this. Do you guys know who these are? Because I can't put my movie out until I get the right one. And they go, oh, well, they were here, but they left, and they've now gone to Florida with a group of people that went to Florida. Okay, now I'm on my way to Florida. So yes, we do come in and pretend to be different things to allow us to get information out of people.
what does your mental health and self-care look like? Because this is a very dark and deep, like I'm getting chills just thinking about the scenes and the scenarios and the things that you've probably seen. How do you deal with this situation yourself personally?
It's a great question, and two thoughts come to mind. One is that I used to be an instructor for the Crisis Prevention Institute, and one of the things that I did for my employees was we went through not only how you're going to therapeutically help somebody else, but we're going to go through how we're going to go into therapeutic rapport afterwards with your own family. Okay? Because you can't bring all of this and go home to your family. Eventually it's going to eat you up. So yes, there are very, very specific and very good ways to be able to work with yourself or to have the other people you're working with support you through things. So yes, but it's a great question. The second point that I have is that on the returning of parentally abducted children, I go on about a 3-month high after returning a child. I can think of,
so emotional.
Yeah.
Well, and I can think of a lot of them, but I think of one to where the mother had custody here in the United States. The father took the child to a Middle Eastern country where they don't, in that particular situation, that particular family or group doesn't treat women that well, or girls. And getting her out of that situation, putting her back in the arms of her mother.
Wow.
So it's like a 3-month high. So every other thing that I'm doing that's sort of affecting me, when you succeed on something like that, you realize it was all worth it.
It goes back to another question, which you kind of answered. How did you get into this in the first place? And, what interested you in this space?
My family was in construction. They were in roofing. And I fell off of a roof at 19 years old. I herniated 2 discs in my back and realized that I was not going to be doing that job. That was not going to work for me. And at the same time, I was in college. I was taking law classes, so I didn't really expect that I was going to be a roofer forever, but it was going to get me through for a while. I now knew that I couldn't do that. And I was laid up for about 6 weeks. And I was doing my own laundry, and I found a business card of a private investigator. And I went, that's it. I'm going to be a private investigator. And I called that guy, and he said, I work alone. What? I said, but you don't understand. I can help you. I'm young, and I can do all these things. And he goes, I work alone. But I'll connect you with somebody. So he connected me with a person who was my mentor, which was Walt Swanitzer. And at 19 years old, I sat down in his office and listened to everything that he said. And at the end, he said, I need a 19-year-old kid like I need another hole in my head. Goodbye. And he dismissed me. But what I heard him say in that conversation was the reason he wouldn't hire a 19-year-old is because you don't have enough patience to do this job. So for about a week after that, I showed up in his office and sat there and talked with his secretary. And he would walk in the office, and he would look at her, he would look at me, he'd look back at her and go, and he'd go in his office and shut the door. And I'd sit there for about another hour, and then I'd go home. And I did it every day. And finally, he came out, and he says to her, he goes, look, we just got a location on this vehicle. They also did repossessions besides investigation. He goes, get me George. George is on some other case. Okay, get me Brett. No, he's not available either. Oh, get me Norm. No, he's not available. And he looks at me, and he looks at her, and he goes, you ever repossessed a car? I said, yes, sir. I hadn't. And he goes, okay. Tells her, all right, give it to him. So they give me this assignment. I look at it, and I go, okay. It was in Pomona. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning. I drive straight to Pomona, see the car, contact the towing company. We pull up, we hook up, they start towing it out, and this guy runs out of the house, and I'm holding the paperwork. I said, sir, this is a legal repossession. You need to stay back. And he goes, no, I need to take that paper and shove it up your ass when I catch you. So I turned around and I ran. I jumped on the back of the tow truck. They took me to my car, went all the way back to Walt, went in, so proud, handed the paperwork, assignment done, sir. He goes, you're not very bright, are you? I don't understand. Sir, I just did the job. He goes, it's the middle of the damn day. Why didn't you wait till night? And I said, well, there was notes in the file that said that they'd called some nearbys and they thought that he worked at night, so I didn't think it would work out. And he looked at her and he said, this is either going to be one of the best decisions I've ever made or the worst. You're hired. That was my first case.
Wow.
Wow. So before getting into this, were there fears? This is a really intense, overwhelming, and traumatizing job.
Well, I was 19 years old, and what I knew about investigation was what we see on TV. So I thought it was exciting. I thought, you know what? I'm going to be Magnum PI, or I'm going to be Rockford, or whatever. And actually, somebody asked me one time. They said, "You're just like Rockford." And I said, "Yeah, but I don't get beat up every week."
But how much of the job is dangerous?
It can be very dangerous, but I think that if you go about it correctly, and maybe I've just been fortunate, maybe I'm just living the right life or whatever, that when situations have become a little out of hand, we've made some of the right decisions. It's another thought that I had on that idea of being dangerous is that someone which is Logan Clark. Yeah. Logan and I were on a case, and we were both undercover, and we were in a bar. And we're trying to get information from people in this bar. And whatever our cover was, it wasn't that either one of us was an actor. And all of a sudden, Logan glances up, and a TV show comes on, and he's in it.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Like that.
Timing.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, they're not going to believe we're whatever we were at that time. And so Logan immediately looks at the bartender and goes, the game, you got to put the game on right now. Please, put the game on, like this. And the guy goes, what game? The baseball game? He goes, the game, the one that's on right now, because Logan didn't know what would be on right now. He goes, just put the game on like this. So the guy just starts changing channels till he hits a sports thing or something like that. We both look at each other and go,
wow.
So, and we were in a biker bar, and if they would have found out that we were not who we said we were, that could have got a little dangerous.
It's fascinating. The ability to react in those types of stressful situations, the mind is such a powerful thing. I really want to go into, right, because we kind of discussed, obviously, what's important for the families, signs and symptoms, things to look out for. Obviously, you can go in a deep dive on social media and how to look for things. I really want to talk about the cases and what happens afterwards, right? Because obviously we're a mental health podcast, right, and today is a focus on trauma and PTSD. And I don't care who you are, but if you go through an experience like this, whether it's a close call or it actually happens, the traumatic effects of it are lifelong.
Yeah.
Because, in our specialties, that's the type of clients that we work with. What have you seen, and what do you find helpful to victims of this sort in accessing care and help, and what do they need, and what can parents kind of give their loved ones in those types of situations?
Well, what parents can give them is love. I mean, that's the very first thing is don't judge them. Whatever it is that they've gone through, they're already embarrassed about it. So give them love. The other thing is that, and as you mentioned in the introduction, one of the companies that I used to have was West Shield Adolescent Services. In fact, I don't know, we even talked about it. My oldest son has bought me out of that company.
Wow.
Congratulations.
But what that one does is it does the crisis intervention and adolescent transport to specialized programs. And what has happened, because there's more and more people that are being rescued out of these human trafficking situations, there are programs now that are focused on dealing with that. And so they have, in some cases, they have people who have gone through it themselves, that have now gone through plenty of therapy to the point that they now feel that they can help somebody else, another young person who has just come out of this and is trying to make sense of it all and trying to figure out, how do I deal with my parents? How do I deal with friends, that now look at me differently? So that what I'm saying is that there are some really great programs out there that can help them.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think we all love. I think our expression of love is what matters.
Yes.
And I think we all have different love languages. And I think it's really easy for a parent to go, what? Oh, I love my kid. Of course I love my kid. My kid knows that. How do you express that, though? Because, again, if you're that father who the way you express your love is to provide, well, your kid will lack that emotional intimacy with you, and that's harmful. So what are specific ways that a parent could express their love to a potential victimized child, or even just a child who is going through a hard time, or an adolescent or a teenager, who clients that you've dealt with?
Well, I think it's going to be different. And I think that getting into some form of counseling is going to be the first step, because they're going to find out, because there are going to be some young people, and we know that when we're recovering them, they don't want to be touched. So you don't want to give them a hug. Now, there are other young people that run up and hug you. And again, I was thinking of a young person that I had taken to a program in Utah, and he wasn't happy that I had done that. He wanted to go home, but the therapists and everybody involved felt that he really needed to go somewhere else before he went home. And one of the issues that he had was being touched. And so when I was bringing someone else to that same program, I looked over and this young man started running towards me. Let me back up. When I dropped him off, and I would say this to every young person, thank you so much for showing me the respect that you have. May I shake your hand or give you a hug? But I'm always asking. I'm not just, give me a hug. Okay, you don't know what everything they've just gone through, so don't try to direct in that way. But in this case, I had said that, and he didn't want to be touched at that time. Well, as he's running towards me, I'm thinking, is he going to hit me? What's going on? He walks up, he stops right in front of me. He says, may I give you a hug?
Wow. That's powerful.
And I realized that what he had, and he'd probably been there a couple of months, and what he had learned that was now setting him up to be able to go back to his own home, his own environment, and be able to respond like he's supposed to as a young person. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
absolutely.
No, 100%. Well, it's about finding out what your love language is in that moment.
Yes.
Right. A very good friend of mine is no longer with us, Mr. Bill Lane, was in this space for a very, very long time. There's different approaches to getting a loved one into treatment, into care, right? Yes. I read on one of your bios that you take a more therapeutic and loving approach. Yes. Because there are the approaches where throw them in the black van, put a duffel bag over their head, and I call it the Russian approach. And I can say it. I'm Ukrainian. I'm just joking. But there's a lot of approaches to it, right? And I appreciate that in your sense. Why do you feel that that's the most effective way? Because and before you give that answer, I recently just had a case where the mom got to a point where she was calling the cops constantly on her son. The son just didn't listen to her. He was fighting her constantly, and she just didn't know what to do. And she was this close to just calling. She asked me, do you have a company that can just come in the middle of the night and take them? Why would you contradict that form of let's say placement and process, coming from a therapeutic standpoint and a loving place?
How would I contradict that? I don't know that I might not contradict it. In other words, I would find out who are the professionals that they've been working with. Is there an educational consultant involved? Is there a psychiatrist, a psychologist? Let me talk with them and see what this young person is going through first before we pick them up in the middle of the night or anything else, and find out what is best. And then even at that point in time, maybe that is the best thing, because one of the things that we would say, and this may be the situation because I don't know the mom in that situation.
Sure, of course, yeah.
But we get young people that'll say, you don't understand. You're taking the wrong person. I come from a dysfunctional family. And then they'll start telling me everything that's wrong with their parents. And I go, that's the beauty of the program you're going to. I go, you won't have to deal with that. They will approach you from a loving place and help you learn to deal with people that might be a little more difficult to deal with, if that's the case. And we always finish it with if that's the case, because it doesn't mean we're buying into what they're saying.
Sure.
But if that is the case, then this is even more reason why you can go here and get some help.
I was 16 when my parents did an intervention on me and sent me to a treatment center. I did not need a transport company to come in. My treatment center was 15 minutes from my house. It felt like the longest ride of my life going from my dad's house to the treatment center, and found out it was like 20 minutes away. But why does someone need someone to come over in the middle of the night to get their kid? At what point does someone need to utilize that type of service?
It's usually when the parents have not communicated so much with their child that the child just wouldn't go. Another one is many of these cases, the child is living in a single parent family. So the parent's working all the time. It could be that the child is a chronic runaway. So that every time the parent says, you know, things just aren't working out, we may have to do something different, they're gone.
And what's interesting is I think someone could look at that teenager and say, well, that's a troubled kid.
Yes.
I would never look at a human and go, that person's troubled. I would say that person is deeply hurting.
Or at risk.
Or at risk. Interesting. Can you go into that?
No, that's exactly, because the terms that you're using, we use they're at risk. If they run away and they end up in a homeless encampment, they're at risk of things far worse than the problems they're having at home.
What do you do in a situation where the family hires you, right? Mm-hmm. And the child, you approach the child, and the child or the adolescent or young adult tells you, I'm afraid or uncomfortable with my parents. And they potentially can be the predators or the perpetrators. How do you react in situations like that? What's your process look like?
It's a great question.
Yes, and if we're talking about if we're in a transport situation, again, we're absolutely going to say the same thing. Well, then this is great. You going here is going to help you by getting you out of that. We're also mandatory reporters, and we are reporting to that program when we take that child. And I've had situations where we've had a male and female team where I've been the male in that situation, and we've transported females that have said, you know, my stepdad was molesting me, and my mother will not accept it when I tell her. Wow. And so we have reported to the program, you know, that this is what has been shared with us, so that it will then be investigated. It's, you know, sometimes they're not telling the truth, but on the possibility that they are telling the truth, we are going to open an investigation in that situation.
Have you seen a difference in ratio between male and female clients that you have? Like, is there more male or female that you work with?
Yes. And when I started doing this, which is now over 40 years ago, it was about 80% males that we were dealing with. Wow. Because we now have equal rights for everything, it's now about 50-50.
What do you mean by equal rights? Like, how does that shifted these types of cases?
It's from the standpoint of females were just more sheltered, because I'm going back 40 years.
Sure.
And so you didn't have as many females that were acting out or that were experimenting with drugs, things like that. You didn't have as much of that. And I'm not saying it means that we shouldn't have equal rights. That isn't the point. I'm saying that as things have changed, as society has changed, we now have an equal amount of young people that are at risk.
Also, do you think that things are more accessible and more visible?
Yes.
And you're able to see more. Just go on Google, go on the internet, and anything you want is accessible. Yeah. So I think it's scary. And to speak to that, I feel like for parents, there needs to be monitoring. Mm-hmm. I mean, would you say that there needs to be more monitoring on technology? And also, that's tough with teenagers. I mean, I have so many teenagers I know where their source of communication connection is through their cell phones, is through their social media. And to take that away from them, it's like taking away their arm.
It's a great point that you bring up, and is because there are parents that will contact us as investigators and, okay, can you set up some covert things on their equipment? And what I tell them is, don't do it covertly, do it overtly. Tell them, this is what I'm doing. And the reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm having tracking on your phone is because I love you so much that I don't want anything to happen to you.
I love that you said that.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. Because it's like, it's as if we do a podcast together. You definitely read my mind.
Yeah, something like that.
Because parents these days are thinking like, how am I going to control what my child is doing online when, like you said, there's the phone, the social media, thanks to Dr. Don Grant and our podcast with him, it's their second arm or third arm, right? And so it's like, how can parents monitor in an open and loving way? And the fact that you said that is being transparent and honest.
Exactly.
It's
with
part
the
of communication. Yeah.
I think it's part of the communication as well as a parent's ability to set and hold the boundary and learn how to sit through their child or teenager's tantrum, because that is, I think, where a lot of parents go wrong in a sense. I hate even saying that because I hate the wrong word, because we already shame ourselves enough as parents. But your kid's going to be angry. Let them be angry and still hold the line. I love you. I'm doing this because I love you. It's okay to be angry. Teach them how to deal with the anger in constructive ways so that they don't think that in order for me to deal with my anger, I have to go hurt somebody or act out with violence. And I think you can set the groundwork for that when they're children.
Yes.
When they're toddlers, learning about frustration tolerance, learning about, I'm different than you. My impact on you is this. And I'm sad that you didn't get me a Power Rangers toy. Oh, so the parent wants to immediately go get them the Power Rangers toy because they don't want their son to be upset. No, let them feel disappointed. So they have a relationship to disappointment that's good. That's life. We're going to be disappointed.
Exactly.
Do you feel that we're in a culture now where it is shifting towards open line of communication?
I think that we are. And I think that as we come out of COVID, I think there was a lot of kids that were now home with their parents, because during that time we were getting a lot more calls,
right?
Because now parents were seeing exactly what was going on with their child.
Right.
And I think that we're getting more communication just by the fact that they had to, and so,
fascinating.
And with many of the conferences that I go to that involve psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists and stuff, there's a big push for that of just saying, don't get to the point to where you need us, just focus on that communication ahead of time, and odds are you won't need us.
It's really exciting because, I grew up in a household where nobody really talked about their feelings or anything like that. And,
This explains a lot.
Yeah, that's why I'm talking about it so much. So I agree with you. I think it is shifting because for hundreds of years, suck it up and go to war, right? And so I think, and the people that ridicule or shame others for being open and transparent and having communication, I think that's slowly dwindling down because the voices are being heard more and more. And I think you can create better change with that. I feel like we have to, because of what's around us and the evolution of the internet and the evolution of access to information, the evolution of equal rights, and which are all beautiful things. We have to. We don't have a choice at this point.
I couldn't agree more. But it goes right to what you're saying. And to tell parents, if you don't communicate with your child, that person on the internet or that person that's out there selling drugs or whatever, they will.
Right.
That's very, very good point.
If anybody takes anything out of this episode, I honestly think it's communicating openly and honestly. It's the number one key to prevent or help prevent a lot of this from happening.
Yeah. One last tip I'll say around that is Dr. Mark Goulston, who we're going to have on a future episode, I learned from him one of the best strategies to communicate with your child/teenager is not to make eye contact with them, but to have them in the car. And when they're in the car, ask them questions while you're in the car with them and you're not having direct communication, because direct eye communication or eye language.
Yeah.
It takes away the intimacy. And I think intimacy can be like super intense sometimes. And so for whatever reason, you put on a song and you talk to them while they're in the car and they open up. I tried it with my kid. I did that a lot with clients. And for some reason, my favorite time with clients, the building the rapport was in the car, listening to music, not looking at each other.
It's very interesting. I mean, as you were explaining it, I started thinking about it. It makes a lot of sense.
It does, 100%. I find that just in my personal experience with my daughter, our best times of communication is when she's taking a bath. And she's playing around, and I'm just like, so how was your day? And like, what'd you do? And like, she's very transparent. Whereas compared to when I would sit down with her and I was just like, well, so what'd you do today? Like, how? She's like, no, I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about it. So it's like, when it's playful and it's fun and it's not like demanding you get the information is usually when you get the most out of it, right?
That's so interesting and true. Our kids are doing the exact same thing.
Oh my gosh.
My son is doing the same thing. He's like, no, I don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah, right. That's
well, Alan, I so appreciate your time that you took to come onto this show. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I feel like you've helped so many families today, including myself. So thank you. And you are a true warrior and angel walking this earth. What you've done for people and children and families. I mean, I don't even know what to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you.
We do have one final question we typically ask most of our guests.
All right.
If you can take Alan 15 years back, what would the Alan of today tell the Alan of 15 years ago?
Don't work so hard and spend more time with your kids.
I
mean, which is, if you think at the age of mine, this is probably advice that I'm now sharing with you because you're at that stage, both of you are at that stage where, and it kind of goes to what you were saying earlier about, I was raised in that thing of, the way in which you show that you're a male and you're doing your job is how you provide.
Right.
Now, I don't think that I'm one that went that far overboard because I was a room dad and things like that I was the first room dad in our school. So it was new then. But that would be the thing is that it goes by so fast. It feels like I blinked and, another 2 years went by.
Yeah.
And as they get older, it goes faster.
Even faster.
I know. I hate it. I really hate it. Well, thank you, Alan.
So
you mean a lot to me. I really appreciate this.
You're so welcome. But now you guys need to come on my show
Absolutely.
so we can continue this conversation.
Well, I definitely want to talk about homelessness because that's a huge topic. I know you're really passionate about that. So am I, especially we live in, Los Angeles where it's everywhere and it's unfortunate and there's so many levels to it. So I'd love to come on your show and unpack that if you would have us, of course.
Oh, I would love it.
So, Alan, if people have more questions and want to learn more about this subject, how can they reach you, contact you? What can they do?
Probably the best thing to do would be to email me, and that would be at acardoza@conflictinternational.com. And if you have anything that's urgent, if you see something and you want to report it or you want to talk to somebody about something, now that I'm with Conflict, if you go to the website, it's just conflictinternational.com. We've got 24-hour duty agents, so there are, there's a little chat thing that pops up that says, if this is urgent, if you need somebody, they can put you together with someone anywhere in the world.
Fascinating. That's a great plug. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate you coming on.
And thank you, everyone who is listening to our wonderful Got Mental Health podcast. Please show your support by leaving us a review and rate and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And thank you, everyone, for your wonderful feedback and all your lovely comments on social media. We see them, and I appreciate you.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much.